Welcome back to Verified Fears, where we dive deep into the experiences that keep people awake at night. I'm your host, and tonight we're exploring the darker side of the graveyard shift. The stories you're about to hear are dramatizations inspired by real accounts shared by night shift workers across the country. Names, locations, and specific details have been changed. But each story draws from genuine experiences reported by security guards, nurses, clerks, and other overnight workers. From empty office buildings to overnight hospitals, from 24-hour gas stations to abandoned shopping malls. These are the places where normal rules don't seem to apply after midnight. Whether you're currently working nights, have worked them before, or simply wonder what happens when most of the world is asleep, these 11 stories will make you think twice about being alone in the dark. So dim the lights, check your surroundings, and let's begin with story number 1, the security rounds. My name is Calvin, and I've been working night security at the Meridian Financial Building for 8 months now. What I'm about to tell you happened over the course of 3 weeks in November, and I'm writing this down because my supervisor, Janet Morrison, asked me to document everything before I submit my resignation. The Meridian Building is 47 floors of office space in downtown Seattle. During the day, it houses about 3,000 employees across various financial firms, law offices, and consulting groups. At night, it's just me, the cleaning crews until about 2 a.m., and whatever's been riding the elevators with me. My shift runs from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., Sunday through Thursday. Standard protocol requires security rounds every 2 hours, checking all floors from the basement parking garage up to the executive offices on 47. I use the main elevator bank in the central lobby, 3 Otis 2000R elevators that were installed when the building opened in 1998. Elevator B has been my regular choice since I started because it's the most reliable and runs quietest. The first incident happened on November 3rd at 2:17 a.m. I remember the exact time because I always check my watch when I start rounds, and I log everything in my security report. I pressed the button for floor 12. That's where I always start the upward sweep. The elevator doors closed normally, that familiar hydraulic hiss and click. But instead of stopping at 12, the elevator continued past and came to a halt at floor 15. I thought maybe I'd hit the wrong button. Easy mistake when you're 8 months into overnight shifts and running on 3 hours of sleep. But when I checked the floor indicator panel inside the elevator, it clearly showed I had pressed 12. The button was still lit up. The 15 button wasn't pressed at all. But that's where we'd stopped. What made it strange wasn't just the wrong floor. It was the weight sensor. Every elevator in the Meridian Building has a capacity indicator, a small digital readout above the button panel that shows the current load. When I stepped into the elevator alone, it read 185 pounds. Which is about right for me plus my equipment belt. But when the doors opened on 15, it read 370 pounds. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, staring at that number. The elevator was empty, except for me. I could see my reflection in the polished steel walls, just me, my uniform, my flashlight, and radio. But according to the sensor, someone else had gotten on with me. Someone who weighed about 185 pounds, exactly the same as me. I took the stairs down to 12 and completed my rounds on foot that night. When I got back to the security desk, I made a note in the logbook. Elevator B mechanical issue, possible weight sensor malfunction. I didn't mention the floor discrepancy because I figured I'd just been tired and hit the wrong button. The second incident happened 4 nights later, November 7th, same time, 2:17 a.m. I decided to use elevator A instead. thinking maybe B really did have a mechanical problem. This time I pressed the button for floor 24, where I usually check the law offices. The elevator went up past 24 and stopped at 27. And again, the weight sensor showed 370 pounds. But this time, something else happened. As the elevator was rising, I heard breathing that wasn't mine. Not heavy breathing, just the quiet, steady rhythm of someone standing close by. I held my breath for a few seconds to make sure, and yes, I could still hear it. Someone else was breathing in that elevator with me. When the doors opened on 27, the breathing stopped. The weight sensor dropped back to 185 pounds. I immediately pressed the button to go back down to the lobby, and during that descent, I was alone again. No extra weight, no breathing, nothing unusual. That's when I started paying attention to patterns. Over the next 2 weeks, it happened every single night at exactly 2:17 a.m., regardless of which elevator I used. I would press a button for one floor, end up 3 floors higher, and the weight sensor would show double capacity. The breathing started around the 10th floor and continued until the doors opened, at which point everything returned to normal. I tried varying my routine. Different elevators, different starting floors, different times. But if I was in an elevator at 2:17 a.m., this thing happened. If I took the stairs or delayed my rounds until 2:30, everything was normal. It was specifically tied to that time, and specifically to me being in an elevator. On November 18th, I decided to test something. I brought a digital voice recorder, my own personal device, not company equipment. I pressed record as soon as I got in the elevator at 2:15 a.m. When I played it back later, you could clearly hear my footsteps entering the elevator, the doors closing, and then the sound of 2 people breathing. My breathing and someone else's breathing with a slightly different rhythm and pitch. But the strangest thing on that recording was what happened when the elevator reached the wrong floor. You can hear the doors opening, then my voice saying, "Hello? Is someone there?" And then, clear as day, you can hear footsteps. Not my footsteps. I was standing still. Someone else's footsteps, walking out of the elevator. Heavy, deliberate steps. Like dress shoes on a hard floor, I never saw anyone. Not once in 3 weeks did I see another person during these incidents. But every night, someone was getting on that elevator with me at 2:17 a.m., riding up 3 floors past my intended destination and walking away when the doors opened. The final incident was November 21st, my last night working in that building. I had already made up my mind to quit, but I wanted to try one more thing. Instead of pressing a button for a floor below 20, I pressed 47, the top floor. I figured maybe this thing, whatever it was, couldn't make the elevator go higher than the building's maximum. The elevator went past 47. The floor indicator showed 48, then 49, then 50. Floors that don't exist. The weight sensor showed 370 pounds. I could hear the breathing. But now the elevator wasn't stopping. We just kept going up, past floors that weren't there, while the building creaked and settled around us in ways I'd never heard before. At floor 53, I started pressing every button on the panel. Emergency stop, door open, lobby, parking garage, anything to make it stop. Finally, at what the indicator claimed was floor 57, the elevator halted. The doors opened onto darkness. Not an unlit hallway or an empty floor. Pure darkness, like looking into deep water at night. That's when I heard the footsteps again. But this time, they weren't walking away from me. They were walking toward the elevator. Steady, measured steps coming out of that darkness. I pressed the lobby button about 15 times. and mercifully, the doors closed. The descent felt normal. Proper elevator physics, no strange sounds, weight sensor back to 185 pounds. When I reached the lobby, I immediately called Janet Morrison and told her I was finishing my shift early due to a medical emergency. I've never been back to that building. I found out later that the previous night's security guard, a guy named Dennis Park, had quit suddenly in October with no explanation. And before Dennis, there was someone else who lasted only 6 weeks. Janet mentioned that they'd had trouble keeping overnight security staff, but she attributed it to the usual reasons: isolation, odd hours, better opportunities elsewhere. I'm writing this report because I think someone should know what's happening in that building after 2 a.m. Maybe it's some kind of electromagnetic interference with the elevator systems. Maybe it's infrasound or some other phenomenon that can explain the breathing and footsteps. But I can't explain the floors that don't exist, or why it happens at exactly the same time every night, or why the weight sensor registers a second person who isn't there. All I know is that every night at 2:17 a.m., someone gets on that elevator. And they're still riding it up to floors that shouldn't exist, in a building where no one else wants to work the overnight shift. Let's move to our second story. My name is Idlani, and I'm a registered nurse in the ICU at Providence General Hospital. I've been working the night shift for 4 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything that could happen during those quiet hours between midnight and dawn. What I'm about to share happened over 2 weeks in October, and I'm still not sure if I should have reported it to hospital security or the police. Maybe both. I work 4 12-hour shifts a week, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., Tuesday through Friday. The ICU is on the 3rd floor of the North Wing, with 24 beds arranged in a horseshoe pattern around the central nursing station. During night shifts, we typically have 3 nurses and 1 charge nurse covering the unit, plus a respiratory therapist and usually 1 doctor doing rounds. It's quiet most nights. Families go home around 9 p.m., visiting hours are over, and unless there's an emergency, it's just us and the patients. The break room is at the end of the hall, past the family consultation rooms and the supply closets. It's nothing fancy. A few tables, some chairs, 2 vending machines, a refrigerator, and a coffee maker that we keep running 24 hours a day. The night shift staff tends to spend our 30-minute breaks in there, catching up on paperwork or just decompressing from whatever crisis we've been managing. On October 8th, I came in for my shift at 7 p.m. and immediately noticed something was off in the break room. My water bottle, which I always leave in the same spot in the refrigerator, 2nd shelf, right side, next to the orange juice that's been there since September, was on the counter next to the coffee maker. Not a big deal. Maybe housekeeping moved it when they cleaned, or another nurse borrowed some space in the fridge. I didn't think much about it. But when I came back from my first break at 11:30 p.m., my sweater was draped over a different chair than where I'd left it. I always sit at the table closest to the window, and I always hang my sweater on the back of the chair to my left. Now it was on the chair across from where I'd been sitting. Again, easily explained. Maybe someone else had used the table and moved it. The night shift is small enough that we all know each other's routines, and we're generally respectful about personal space. The third incident happened during my 3 a.m. break on October 10th. I keep a small notebook where I jot down reminders for the next shift. Patient updates, medication changes, family concerns. I write in blue ink exclusively, always have, because it shows up clearly in hospital lighting and doesn't smudge like pencil. When I opened my notebook that night, there was a note written in black ink that I didn't remember writing. Check on Mr. Morrison in 314. Daughter called worried. The thing was, we didn't have a patient named Morrison. Room 314 had been empty for 3 days since Mrs. Gonzalez was discharged, and I always write my notes at the nursing station, never in the break room. But there it was, in handwriting that looked almost like mine, but not quite. The letters were formed the same way I formed them, but the pressure was different, like someone had been trying to imitate my writing style. I asked the other nurses if anyone had borrowed my notebook or knew about a Morrison family. Linda, who's been working nights longer than anyone, said she'd never heard the name. Marcus, our charge nurse, checked the admission records going back 2 weeks. No Morrison, no calls from worried family members about room 314. That's when I started paying attention to the break room in a different way. Every night, I would arrange my things in a specific pattern. Water bottle in the fridge, sweater on the left chair, notebook closed with my pen laid across the cover. And every night, something would be moved. Not dramatically, just shifted slightly. Enough to notice if you were looking for it. On October 13th, I decided to test something. Before my 3 a.m. break, I arranged a small paper cup next to the coffee maker, positioned exactly in the center of a napkin. When I came back 20 minutes later, the cup had been moved 3 inches to the left, but the napkin hadn't been touched. Someone had been in that break room while I was gone. Someone careful enough to move only the cup and not disturb anything else. The escalation started on October 15th. I was sitting in the break room during my 3 a.m. break, catching up on charting, when I heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Slow, deliberate steps, like someone walking carefully to avoid making noise. The thing was, all the other nurses were busy with patients, and I could see the nursing station from where I sat. No one had walked past the break room. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. I could see the shadow of someone's feet under the gap at the bottom of the door, 2 dark shapes blocking the light from the hallway. They stood there for maybe 30 seconds, not moving, like someone was listening or waiting for something. Then the shadows moved away, and I heard the footsteps continue down the hall toward the patient rooms. I immediately got up and looked out into the hallway. Empty. I walked down to the nursing station where Linda was reviewing lab results and Marcus was on the phone with a doctor. I asked if either of them had just walked past the break room. Linda looked at me strangely and said she'd been at the station for the past hour. Marcus covered the phone and shook his head. But the strangest thing was what I found when I went back to finish my break. My notebook was open to a page I hadn't been working on, and there was another note in that, almost my handwriting. Patient in room 318 needs extra blanket. Says he's cold. Room 318 was Mr. Patterson, an elderly man recovering from pneumonia. When I checked on him, he was awake and mentioned that he'd been feeling chilly, but hadn't wanted to bother the nurses for something so minor. This pattern continued for the next week. Every night during my 3 a.m. break, I would hear footsteps that stopped outside the break room, see shadows under the door, and find helpful notes in my notebook written in handwriting that wasn't quite mine. The notes were always accurate. Reminders about patients who needed attention, family members who had called with concerns, medication times that had been moved. Information that would have required access to our computer system and knowledge of the patient's current conditions. On October 19th, I decided I needed to see who was leaving these notes. I set up my phone to record video during my break, positioning it so it would capture anyone who entered the break room. At 3:05 a.m., I left for what I told everyone was a bathroom break. But I actually went to the supply closet across the hall where I could watch the break room door through the crack. At 3:08 a.m., I saw him. A man in hospital scrubs, medium height, dark hair, walking slowly down the hallway toward the break room. He moved like he belonged there, with the quiet confidence of someone who knew the unit's layout. When he reached the break room door, he stopped and looked directly at the supply closet where I was hiding. For just a moment, we made eye contact through that narrow gap, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. He smiled, not a friendly smile, but the kind of smile that says he knows something you don't. Then he pushed open the break room door and went inside. I counted to 10 and followed him, but when I entered the break room, it was empty. My notebook was open to a fresh page, and there was a new note. Thanks for the extra shift coverage. Hope you don't mind the company. I checked my phone recording immediately. The video showed me setting up the phone, leaving the room, and then nothing. No one entered the break room. The door never opened, but you could hear something. Soft sounds like pages turning, a chair creaking, the scratch of a pen on paper. At the end of the recording, just before I came back into frame, you can hear what sounds like someone saying thank you in a voice that's almost a whisper. That night, I talked to Linda about the hospital's history. She's been at Providence General for 15 years, and she knows all the stories. According to her, there used to be a nurse named David Chen who worked nights in the ICU. This was about 6 years ago, before my time. David was known for being incredibly dedicated. He would stay late to help with difficult cases, cover shifts for sick colleagues, and always went above and beyond for his patients. David died in a car accident on his way home from work one morning in October. Linda said he'd been covering a double shift because another nurse had called in sick, and he probably fell asleep at the wheel from exhaustion. The accident happened at 3:47 a.m. on Highway 52, about 10 minutes from the hospital. After David's death, several nurses reported strange incidents during night shifts. Personal items moved in the break room, helpful notes appearing in handwriting that looked familiar, the sound of footsteps in empty hallways. But management attributed it to grief and stress, and eventually the reports stopped. Linda said most people figured it was just their imagination, a way of processing the loss of a colleague who had been so present and helpful during those quiet overnight hours. I worked one more shift after that conversation, on October 21st. During my 3 a.m. break, I sat in the break room and spoke out loud to the empty air. I said that I appreciated the help with patient care, but that his presence was making me uncomfortable, and maybe it was time for him to rest. I left my notebook open to a blank page with a pen beside it. When I came back from my rounds, there was one final note. You're a good nurse. Take care of them. The handwriting was clearer this time, more confident, like someone who was finally ready to say goodbye. I haven't had any incidents since then. No moved items, no mysterious notes, no footsteps in the hallway. The break room feels normal again. Just a quiet space where tired nurses can take a few minutes to recharge before going back to care for their patients. I never reported any of this to hospital administration. What would I say? That a deceased colleague was helping me take better care of patients during night shifts? That someone who died doing exactly what I do every night was still trying to make sure no one was forgotten or neglected during those vulnerable overnight hours? Sometimes I miss finding those helpful notes. David was right. I am a good nurse, and I do take care of them. But during those long, quiet hours when it's just us and the patients, it was comforting to know that someone else was looking out for everyone too. Let's move to our third story. My name is Jake, and I've been working the overnight shift at the Shell station on Route 34 for 3 years now. It's not glamorous work. Mostly truckers, late-night travelers, and people getting off second shift who need cigarettes or energy drinks. But it pays the bills, and after a while, you get to know the regulars. There's Mrs. Patterson, who comes in every Tuesday around 1 a.m. for lottery tickets and diet soda. There's Mike the trucker, who stops by Thursdays for coffee and always asks about my college classes. And then there's him, the man I just call the regular. He started coming in about 6 months after I began working there. So sometime around March 2022, always the same time. 2:45 a.m. on the dot, always the same routine. He walks in, nods at me politely, goes straight to the back coolers and gets a 20-ounce bottle of Coca-Cola Classic. Not Pepsi, not Diet Coke, always the glass bottle Coca-Cola from the specialty section that costs twice as much as the regular stuff. Then he goes to aisle 3 and gets a king-size Snickers bar. Finally, he stops at the magazine rack and picks up whatever issue of Time magazine is current. The total always comes to $8.47 with tax. He always pays with a $10 bill, always tells me to keep the change, and always says, "Have a good night, Jake," before leaving. Never varies. Same items, same total, same polite conversation. The only thing that's changed over 3 years is that I've gotten older, gained some weight, lost some hair, and developed the kind of permanent exhaustion that comes with working nights while taking day classes. But him, he looks exactly the same as the day I first saw him. I mean exactly the same. Same age, maybe mid-30s, same height, same build, same short brown hair with no gray, same navy blue jacket that never looks worn or faded, same polite smile that never seems forced or tired, even at 2:45 in the morning. Even his voice sounds the same, calm, pleasant, like someone who's genuinely having a good night, despite being awake at an hour when most people are deep asleep. For the first 2 years, I didn't think much about it. Some people just age well, and maybe he works nights too, so he's naturally adjusted to being up at that hour. Plus, I see him for maybe 3 minutes every night, always under the harsh fluorescent lights of the gas station. It's not like I'm studying his face in detail or keeping track of whether he's developing wrinkles. But around January of this year, I started paying closer attention. Not because I was suspicious, just because when you see the same person almost every single night for that long, you notice things. The way he always walks the same path through the store, door, coolers, aisle 3, magazine rack, counter. The way he never seems to be in a hurry, but also never lingers or browses. The way he always has exact change ready, like he knows the total before I ring it up. What really got my attention was when I realized he never seemed to actually consume what he was buying. I know that sounds weird. How would I know what a customer does after they leave my store? But think about it. If someone comes into your workplace every single night for 3 years and buys the same food and drink, you start to notice patterns. Mrs. Patterson throws her empty diet soda bottles in our outside trash can when she comes back the next week. Mike brings his refillable coffee mug because he goes through so much coffee. But the regular never showed any signs of being someone who drinks a Coke and eats a Snickers bar every single night. No caffeine jitters, no sugar crash, no weight gain, no tooth problems, nothing. He looked and acted exactly the same, whether it was his first visit or his 1,000th. More importantly, he never acknowledged our previous interactions. Every night, he treated me like we were meeting for the first time. Polite, pleasant, but with no recognition that we'd had this exact same transaction hundreds of times before. In February, I decided to test something. When he came in on February 15th, I said, "Hey, how's it going?" Same as always, like I would with any regular customer. He smiled politely and said, "I'm sorry." Same as what? Like he genuinely had no idea what I was talking about. So I explained. Coke, Snickers, Time magazine, $8.47 total. He looked surprised and said, "Oh, That does sound good. I'll take those, thanks. Like I was making a recommendation instead of describing what he bought every single night. That's when I started keeping a log. Nothing fancy, just a small notebook where I recorded his visits. Date, time of arrival, items purchased, anything unusual about his behavior or appearance. After 6 weeks of documentation, the pattern was undeniable. Every single night except Sundays, 2:45 a.m. exactly. Same 3 items, same payment method, same polite conversation that never referenced any previous visit. The Sunday thing was interesting because our store is open 24/7, including Sundays. But he never came in on Sunday nights. Never. I worked every Sunday night for 3 years, and not once did I see him. It was like Sundays didn't exist in his routine. In April, I decided to check the security footage. Our system keeps recordings for 30 days, and I had access because part of my job involves reviewing footage when there are discrepancies with the register. I pulled up recordings from several of his recent visits, expecting to see what I always saw: a normal customer following his normal routine. What I saw instead made me question everything I thought I knew about this situation. On the security footage, the regular appeared to be shopping alone, just like I remembered. But when I watched him at the register, something was wrong with the audio. You could hear me greeting him, hear the beep of items being scanned, hear the transaction being completed, but you couldn't hear his voice responding. At all. I thought maybe it was an audio issue with that particular recording, so I checked several others. Same thing every time. I could hear myself having a conversation, but only my side of it. On the footage, it looked like I was talking to someone who never responded, just smiled and nodded silently. But I clearly remembered him speaking to me during those transactions. Even stranger was what happened when I watched him select his items. The cameras showed him walking to the coolers, reaching for something, and then walking away. But the cooler door never opened, and nothing was ever removed from the shelf. Same thing with the candy aisle and the magazine rack. On camera, he went through the motions of shopping, but he never actually picked up anything. Yet when he came to the counter, I was scanning items. The register recordings showed transactions for Coca-Cola, Snickers bars, and magazines. The inventory system showed these items being sold. The money was in the register drawer. But the security footage showed a man going through shopping motions without actually shopping, having a conversation without actually speaking. I spent hours going through old footage, checking recordings from his very first visits back in 2022. Same thing every time. A man who appeared to be shopping but wasn't. Having conversations that only I seemed to be participating in. Buying items that he never actually picked up from the shelves. But here's the thing that really shook me. When I checked our inventory reports for those specific items, the glass bottle Coca-Cola Classic, king-size Snickers bars, and Time magazines, the numbers didn't add up. According to our sales data, we were selling one of each almost every night. According to our inventory counts, we weren't missing any of these items. We were somehow selling products without losing them from our stock. I brought this up with my manager, Tom, during a shift change in May. I didn't mention the supernatural aspects, just said I'd noticed some discrepancies in the inventory system and wanted to make sure we weren't getting charged for products we weren't actually receiving. Tom looked into it and came back a week later saying he'd found some glitches in the system that had been corrected. But the regular kept coming. Same time, same routine, same items, same impossible transaction that somehow worked despite making no logical sense. I started dreading 2:45 a.m., not because I was scared of him. He was never threatening or even particularly creepy, but because I couldn't understand what was happening. and it was making me question my own perception of reality. The breaking point came in early June. I was working a double shift because the morning guy had called in sick. So I was still there when the day shift manager, Lisa, came in at 6 a.m. She was doing her routine check of the overnight sales reports when she paused and looked confused. "Jake, why do we have a transaction for $8.47 at 2:45 a.m. with no items listed?" she asked, showing me the register report. "Did you forget to scan something?" I looked at the report. There was the transaction, time-stamped at exactly 2:45 a.m. like always. But instead of showing Coca-Cola, Snickers, and Time magazine, it just showed MISC item, $8.47, with no product details, like the register had recorded a sale without recording what was actually sold. That night, I waited for 2:45 a.m. with a new plan. When the regular walked in and went through his usual routine, I was going to pay close attention to exactly what happened when he brought his items to the counter. I was going to watch my own hands as I scanned them. I was going to listen carefully to his voice. I was going to figure out what was real and what wasn't. 2:45 a.m. came and went. He didn't show up. I waited until 3:15, thinking maybe he was running late. But the store stayed empty except for me. The next night, same thing. And the night after that. For 2 weeks straight, no sign of the regular. I checked with Tom to see if anything had changed about our store policies or hours. Nothing. I reviewed the security footage to make sure I hadn't somehow missed him. Nothing. It was like he had just stopped existing. On June 20th, I was restocking the magazine rack when I found something that made my hands shake. Wedged behind the current issues was an old copy of Time magazine from March 2019, 3 years before the regular started coming to our store. The cover was about some political scandal I barely remembered, and the pages were yellowed like it had been sitting there for years. But attached to it with a paperclip was a receipt from our store, dated March 15th, 2019, for $8.47. Same total he always paid, but 3 years before I'd ever seen him. The receipt was signed at the bottom in handwriting I didn't recognize. "Thanks for everything, Jake. Take care of yourself." I never saw the regular again after that. But sometimes, during the quiet hours around 2:45 a.m., I hear the cooler door opening and closing, the soft sound of someone walking through the aisles, and the electronic beep of the register processing a transaction. When I check in the morning, there's always $8.47 in cash that wasn't there the night before, sitting next to the register with no corresponding transaction record. I've stopped trying to figure it out. Some things don't have explanations that make sense, especially during those hours when the rest of the world is sleeping and the rules seem different. All I know is that for 3 years, someone needed to buy a Coke, a Snickers bar, and a magazine at 2:45 a.m. And somehow, I was part of helping that happen. Maybe that's enough. Let's move to our fourth story. My name is Tom Brennan, and I've worked in hospital maintenance for 12 years, the last 5 at St. Mary's Regional Medical Center here in Portland. I'm writing this down because my supervisor, Dave McKinnon, says I need to document everything that's been happening on the night shift before he can approve my transfer to day maintenance. I don't blame him for wanting it in writing. If someone told me this story, I'm not sure I'd believe it either. St. Mary's is a 7-story building that opened in 1962, with 3 basement levels that most people don't know exist. The main basement, level B1, is where we keep the laundry facilities, main electrical, and bulk storage. Level B2 houses the old boiler system that was replaced in the 90s but never removed, plus additional storage and some offices that haven't been used in years. Level B-3 is where things get complicated. According to the building blueprints I've been working with for 5 years, Level B-3 is mostly utility tunnels, water mains, electrical conduits, ventilation shafts, that sort of thing. It's supposed to be a narrow space, maybe 6 feet high in most places, running underneath the foundation to connect the building's major systems. During normal business hours, the only reason to go down there is for emergency repairs or the quarterly inspections that the city requires. I work the night shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., Wednesday through Saturday. Most of my job is routine maintenance, checking HVAC systems, replacing burned-out lights, fixing leaky faucets, responding to emergency calls from the nursing staff. The night shift is usually quiet, which is why they only schedule one maintenance worker instead of the full crew that works days. The first strange thing happened on March 8th, around 1:30 a.m. I got a work order that had been slipped under my office door while I was doing rounds on the 4th floor. The order was written on our standard maintenance request form, but the handwriting wasn't familiar. It said, Room B347, replace fluorescent fixture, reports of flickering causing patient discomfort. The request was signed by someone called Dr. E. Morrison, but I'd never heard that name before. And I know most of the staff doctors at St. Mary's. What bothered me wasn't just the unfamiliar doctor's name. According to every building plan I'd ever seen, there was no room B347. Level B-3 was supposed to be utility tunnels, not patient rooms. But work orders come from the hospital administration, and my job is to complete them, not question them. I figured maybe there was some section of the basement that I hadn't been to yet, or maybe the room numbers down there followed a different system than I understood. I took my tool bag and headed down to B3 using the maintenance elevator at the north end of the building. This elevator is the only one that goes down to all 3 basement levels. The regular patient and visitor elevators only go to B1. When I got to B3, I stepped out into what should have been a cramped utility corridor. Instead, I found myself in a proper hallway. Not wide like the patient floors upstairs, but a real hallway with white walls, tile floors, and room numbers painted on green plaques just like everywhere else in the hospital. The lighting was dim, just emergency fixtures providing enough illumination to see where you were going. But it was clearly designed for people to walk through, not just for accessing pipes and electrical panels. I followed the room numbers down the hall, B3-23, B3-25, B3-29. They weren't consecutive, which was odd but not unheard of in older buildings where rooms had been converted or renumbered over the years. I kept walking until I found B347, about halfway down the corridor. The door was propped open, and inside was what looked like a standard hospital room from maybe the 1970s. 2 beds, though only one had bedding on it. A small bathroom, a window that looked out onto what should have been solid earth since we were 3 stories underground, and indeed, a flickering fluorescent light fixture above the bed. I replaced the fixture. Standard maintenance work, nothing unusual about it. But while I was working, I kept hearing sounds from other rooms along the hallway. Not loud sounds, just the quiet noises you'd expect in a hospital at night. Someone coughing softly, the murmur of voices having a conversation too low to make out words, the squeak of a wheelchair or gurney being moved down the hall. When I finished the light fixture and stepped back into the hallway, it was completely empty. All the other room doors were closed, and when I tried the handles, they were locked. The sounds had stopped entirely. I walked back to the elevator, completed my work order paperwork, and didn't think much more about it. Hospitals are full of sounds, and at night, acoustics can play tricks on you. Sounds carry through ventilation systems, echo off walls, seem to come from places they're not actually originating. The second work order appeared 4 nights later, on March 12th. Same handwriting, same Dr. E. Morrison signature. This time it was for room B323. Bathroom faucet dripping, reports of noise disturbing patient's sleep. Again, I took my tools down to B3, found the room without any trouble, and fixed a standard leaky faucet. And again, while I was working, I heard those soft hospital sounds coming from other rooms. But this time, I decided to investigate. After I finished the faucet repair, I walked quietly down the hallway and listened at each door. Behind the door of B3-29, I could clearly hear someone breathing, the slow, steady rhythm of someone in deep sleep. Behind B331, there was the soft beeping of what sounded like a heart monitor. Behind B3-35, I heard pages turning, like someone reading a book or magazine. I tried the door handles again. Still locked. I knocked softly on B3-29, where I'd heard the breathing. The breathing stopped immediately, but no one answered. After about 30 seconds, the breathing resumed. But it sounded different now, more careful, like someone trying to breathe quietly. That's when I realized something that made my stomach drop. According to the building directory that I consult for every work order, there was no pediatric ward at St. Mary's. We had a family practice, an emergency room, and various adult specialties, but no dedicated children's department. Yet some of the sounds I was hearing, the voice patterns, the size of the coughs, even the way the breathing sounded, suggested children. I went back to my office and pulled out the complete building plans that Dave had given me when I started working nights. I spread them across my desk and studied level B-3 in detail. According to these blueprints, drawn in 1987 during a major renovation, level B3 was nothing but utility space. Narrow corridors for accessing major building systems, storage areas for replacement parts, and a small workshop area. No patient rooms, no windows, certainly no space for the wide hallway I'd been walking through. But I'd been there. I'd walked down that hallway, fixed that light, repaired that faucet. I had the completed work orders to prove it. Either the blueprints were wrong, or something very strange was happening in the basement of St. Mary's Regional Medical Center. The third work order came on March 16th. Room B3-18, adjust heating vent. Patient complaints of room being too cold. By now, I was expecting it, but I was also dreading it. I gathered my tools and headed down to B3. But this time, I brought something extra. My digital camera. I figured if there really was a whole wing of the hospital that wasn't on any official plans, I should document it. Room B3-18 was at the far end of the hallway, past all the other rooms I'd been to before. When I got there, I found something that made me understand why the heating vent needed adjustment. The window in this room, the window that shouldn't exist because we were underground, looked out onto what appeared to be a playground. I could see swing sets, a slide, sandbox equipment, all covered with a light dusting of snow, even though it was March, and we hadn't had snow in Portland for weeks. But the playground wasn't empty. There were children playing on the equipment. Not many, maybe 5 or 6, all wearing what looked like hospital gowns. They were playing quietly, no shouting or laughing like you'd normally hear from kids on a playground. Just the soft sounds of children trying to have fun without making too much noise. I adjusted the heating vent as requested, but I spent most of my time watching through that impossible window. The children never looked up at the building, never seemed to notice me watching them. They just played their quiet games in that snowy playground that couldn't exist. When I tried to take pictures, my camera malfunctioned. The display would show that I was taking photos, but when I reviewed them, they were all completely black. Not blurry, not poorly lit, just solid black like I'd taken pictures with the lens cap on. I tried different settings, different angles, even took some test shots of the room itself. The room photos came out fine, but any time I pointed the camera toward the window, the images were black. That night, I did something I probably shouldn't have. Instead of going home after my shift, I drove around to the area where that playground should have been, based on my understanding of the building's layout. It was just a patch of grass next to the hospital's parking lot. No playground equipment, no snow, no signs that children had ever played there. But when I looked up at the hospital building from that spot, I could see a window on what would have been level B-3 glowing softly with warm light. According to the blueprints, that window shouldn't exist. According to the building's exterior, that whole section should be underground. But there it was, and through it, I could just make out the shapes of children moving around inside. The work orders kept coming, always with the same handwriting, always signed by Dr. E. Morrison. Over the next 6 weeks, I made repairs in 12 different rooms on level B-3. I replaced light bulbs, fixed door handles, unclogged drains, adjusted thermostats, and performed dozens of other routine maintenance tasks in rooms that officially didn't exist for patients who weren't on any hospital records. I started researching the hospital's history, trying to understand what I was dealing with. In the Portland Public Library's newspaper archives, I found a series of articles from 1987 about a fire at St. Mary's that had destroyed the children's wing. 15 children had died in that fire, along with several staff members. The articles mentioned that the pediatric ward had been located in the basement level to make it easier for families to access from the parking areas. After the fire, the children's wing had been sealed off, and the hospital had been rebuilt without a pediatric department. The basement space where the children's ward had been was converted to utility areas and storage. According to the final article in the series, dated December 1987, the renovation was complete and there was no longer any trace of the children's wing that had been lost. But Dr. E. Morrison was mentioned in those articles. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison had been the head of pediatrics at St. Mary's. She had died in the fire, along with several of her patients, staying behind to try to evacuate the children instead of saving herself. I haven't been down to level B-3 in 3 weeks. The work orders stopped appearing after I found those newspaper articles. But sometimes, during my regular rounds on the floors above, I can hear things coming up through the ventilation system. Children's voices, very quiet, like they're trying not to disturb the patients in the rest of the hospital. The sound of small feet running in hallways. Occasionally, the ding of an elevator stopping at a floor that isn't supposed to exist. Dave approved my transfer to day shift. He said he understood that working nights in a building as old as St. Mary's could be stressful, and he thought I might be more comfortable with regular hours and a full crew to work with. He didn't ask for details about why I wanted the transfer, and I didn't volunteer any. But before I start the day shift next Monday, I have one last night shift to work, and I've been thinking that maybe I should go down to level B-3 one more time. Not because there's a work order waiting for me, but because there are children down there who might need someone to check on them, to make sure their lights are working, their heat is adequate, their rooms are comfortable. After all, that's what maintenance workers do. We fix things that are broken, we maintain things that need care, and we make sure that everyone in the building, everyone, is safe and comfortable, even if they're not supposed to be there anymore. Let's move to our fifth story. My name is Angela Torres, and I've been working as an overnight dispatcher for Reliable City Cab for 6 years. I'm writing this incident report at the request of my supervisor, Jim Martinez, who says corporate needs documentation of the unusual radio traffic we've been experiencing during night shifts. I'm not sure how to explain what's been happening, but I'll try to be as accurate as possible about the facts. Reliable City Cab operates 24 hours a day with a fleet of 43 vehicles. During the day shift, we have 4 dispatchers handling call volume, but overnight, it's usually just me from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. The night shift is typically quieter, mostly airport runs, bar pickups, and early morning medical appointments. Our dispatch system is pretty standard. Customers call our main line, I take their information, enter it into the computer system, and radio the closest available driver. The first unusual incident happened on January 15th at 2:33 a.m. I received a call from a woman requesting pickup at 1247 Elm Street for transport to the Greyhound station downtown. Her voice was clear, polite, and she provided all the standard information: name, destination, approximate wait time. Nothing seemed strange about the call itself. I dispatched driver 23, Miguel Santos, who's been with the company for 8 years and is one of our most reliable overnight drivers. Miguel's response came back about 12 minutes later, which was longer than the usual 8-minute response time for that area. When he keyed his radio, he sounded confused. "Dispatch, this is 23. I'm at the Elm Street location, but there's no 1247. The address goes from 1243 to 1251, but there's just an empty lot between them. No building, no passenger waiting. Should I wait or return to service?" I double-checked my dispatch log. The customer, who had given her name as Dorothy Mitchell, had clearly stated 1247 Elm Street. I radioed Miguel to wait 5 more minutes in case there was confusion about the exact location, then returned to service if no one appeared. He confirmed and went back available. What bothered me wasn't just the address confusion that happens sometimes with new construction or address changes. What bothered me was that when I tried to call back the number Dorothy Mitchell had given me, it was disconnected. Not a busy signal, not voicemail, but the automated message saying the number was no longer in service. The second incident was on January 22nd at 1:47 a.m. This time it was a man calling for pickup at 892 Pine Avenue to go to the train station. Same scenario. Driver 31, Carlos Reyes, reported that the address didn't exist. The building numbers on Pine Avenue went from 888 to 896, with what Carlos described as an old foundation and some broken concrete, where 892 should have been. But Carlos added something that Miguel hadn't mentioned. "Dispatch, there's something weird here. I can see tire tracks in the dirt, where this address should be, like a car was parked here recently. And there's a $20 bill on the ground next to where the curb would be if there was a curb. Should I take it to Lost and Found?" I told Carlos to leave the money where it was and return to service. When I tried calling back the customer, same thing. Disconnected number. I started keeping a separate log of these unusual calls, noting the time, the caller's name, the non-existent address, and the driver's report. By February, it was happening 2 or 3 times a week, always between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. Always addresses that didn't exist, in locations where drivers reported seeing signs that someone had been there recently. Money on the ground, cigarette butts, sometimes even luggage or personal items left behind. And always phone numbers that were disconnected when I tried to call back. The breakthrough came on February 8th when I received a call for pickup at 567 Oak Street. The address sounded familiar, so I checked my unusual incidents log. I'd never dispatched to 567 Oak Street before, but something about it nagged at me. After I sent driver 19, Lisa Chen, to check it out, I decided to do some research. I pulled up the city's online property records and searched for 567 Oak Street. According to the database, that address had been demolished in 1998 to make way for a small park. The building that had stood there was a boarding house that had operated from 1952 to 1997. I cross-referenced this information with the other addresses I'd been logging and found that every single one had been demolished years ago. 1247 Elm Street had been an apartment building demolished in 2003. 892 Pine Avenue had been a small hotel demolished in 2001. 423 Cedar Drive had been a rooming house demolished in 2003-1999. All of them had been low-income housing or temporary accommodations, the kind of places where people stayed when they were between permanent homes or couldn't afford better housing. Lisa's radio call came in 25 minutes later, much longer than usual. When she keyed up, she sounded shaken. "Dispatch, this is 19. I need to report something strange. I'm at the Oak Street location, and you're right. There's no building here. But I think I know who called for the pickup." Lisa explained that she'd been sitting in her cab, getting ready to radio back that the address didn't exist, when she saw an elderly man walking toward her car from the park area. He was carrying a small suitcase and wearing clothes that looked old-fashioned, a wool coat and hat that seemed like something from decades ago. She assumed this was her passenger and got out to help him with his luggage. He was really polite, Lisa reported. Said his name was Frank Morrison and he needed to get to the Greyhound station. Told me he'd been staying at 567 Oak Street and his landlady had called a cab for him. I didn't have the heart to tell him the building wasn't there, so I just said okay and opened the back door for him. Lisa drove toward downtown, making small talk with her passenger. Frank told her he was taking the bus to visit his sister in Denver, that he hadn't seen her in years and was looking forward to the trip. He seemed like a perfectly normal elderly man, maybe a little confused about directions, but otherwise alert and friendly. When we got to the Greyhound station, I got out to help him with his suitcase. Lisa continued. But when I opened the back door, there was nobody there. No passenger, no suitcase, nothing. But there was exact change for the fare on the seat, $12.75, except it wasn't regular money. Lisa brought the payment back to the office at the end of her shift. It was $12.75 in currency, but the bills and coins were old, really old. The quarters were silver and dated from the 1960s. The dollar bills had designs I hadn't seen since I was a child, and they were in pristine condition despite their age. Everything about the money looked like it had just come from the bank, but from a bank in 1973. I started researching the names the callers had given me, cross-referencing them with obituaries and city records. Dorothy Mitchell had died in 2004. The man who'd called for pickup at Pine Avenue, Robert Chen, had died in 2003. Frank Morrison had died in 1998, the same year his rooming house at 567 Oak Street had been demolished. Every caller who had requested pickup at these non-existent addresses had lived at those addresses when the buildings were still standing, and every one of them had died within a few years of their building being demolished. Most were elderly people who had lived in low-income housing, people who might have relied on taxi service to get to appointments or to visit family. The incidents continued through March and April, but with a new pattern. Drivers who picked up these passengers, and several more reported actually having someone in their cab for the entire trip, started finding old currency as payment. Never modern bills, always money from decades past, always the exact fare, always left on the seat after the passenger disappeared. Driver 12, Anthony Rodriguez, reported a particularly detailed encounter on March 23rd. He'd been dispatched to an address that I knew by then would be demolished, but I'd stopped telling the drivers about my research. Anthony found his passenger waiting exactly where the building should have been. An elderly woman with a shopping bag who said she needed to get to the grocery store on Fifth Avenue. She talked the whole way there, Anthony reported. Told me about her grandchildren, complained about how expensive everything was getting. Seemed like a sweet old lady. When we got to the store, she paid me with exact change and said she hoped I had a nice night. I got out to help her with her shopping bag, and when I turned around, she was gone. But the money was still in my hand. The money Anthony brought back was from 1967. Bills and coins that were nearly 60 years old, in mint condition. By May, I'd documented 43 of these calls. Always the same pattern. Deceased callers requesting pickup at demolished addresses, drivers finding passengers who disappeared before reaching their destinations, payment in old currency that matched the era when the callers had been alive. The phone numbers they called from were always disconnected when I tried to return the calls, but the calls themselves came through our regular phone system with no technical anomalies. I brought my documentation to Jim Martinez on May 15th. Jim has been in the taxi business for 22 years, and he's seen everything from drunk customers to payment disputes to drivers getting lost in parts of the city that have been there for decades. But he'd never seen anything like my incident reports. Jim decided to test the phenomenon. On May 18th, when I received a call for pickup at another demolished address, 788 Maple Street, requesting transport to the medical center, Jim rode along with driver 27, Patricia Williams. According to both their reports, they found a middle-aged man waiting where the address should have been, carrying what looked like medical files and walking with a cane. The passenger, who introduced himself as David Park, talked about his doctor's appointment and mentioned that he'd been living at 788 Maple Street for 3 years since his wife died. He seemed completely normal, Patricia reported, until they reached the medical center. When she got out to help him with his files, both the passenger and the files were gone. On the back seat was $15.25 in bills and coins from 1985. Jim's theory is that we're dealing with some kind of electromagnetic phenomenon that's causing our phone system to receive calls from the past, somehow recording and playing back conversations from decades ago when these people were alive and actually calling for taxi service. He thinks the old money might be connected to the same phenomenon, possibly materialized from the same time period as the calls. My theory is simpler and probably harder for corporate to accept in an incident report. I think these people died without ever making it to where they were trying to go, and they're still trying to get there. The boarding house residents, the apartment dwellers, the people who lived in temporary housing and relied on taxi service because they didn't have their own cars. Maybe when they died, part of them kept trying to make that trip to visit family or get to a medical appointment or catch a bus to somewhere better. The calls have tapered off in the past few weeks, but they haven't stopped entirely. I still get 1 or 2 a week, always with the same pattern. I've stopped trying to call the numbers back, and I've stopped telling drivers that the addresses don't exist. If someone needs a ride, even someone who died years ago, I figure that's what we're here for. The old currency we've collected over the past 5 months is worth more than face value to coin collectors, according to Jim's research. He suggested we use the extra money to establish a small fund for drivers who have these unusual fares, a kind of bonus for being willing to provide service even when the circumstances are strange. I think that's appropriate. After all, Good customer service shouldn't end just because the customer is no longer technically alive. And if people who died without making it to their destinations are still trying to get there, the least we can do is make sure they have a safe, reliable way to travel, even if they're paying with money from 40 years ago. Let's move to our sixth story. My name is Blair, and I work overnight inventory at Megamart, one of those cavernous big box stores that sells everything from frozen pizza to lawn tractors. My shift runs 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. 4 nights a week, and until last September, I thought I understood retail. Freight arrives, scanners count it, customers buy it, the numbers reconcile. The world keeps turning. What happened over 3 weeks last fall convinced me that the simple arithmetic of inventory can hide something far stranger than shrinkage or software glitches. The overnight crew is small. 6 scanners plus our supervisor, Maria Santos. We break into pairs and fan out. Groceries, electronics, clothing, household, automotive, pharmacy. I've partnered with Kevin Walsh for 2 years. He knows every end cap reset and every blind corner the floor managers never notice. Each of us carries a Zebra TC57 handheld that links wirelessly to the store's inventory system. You scan the UPC, the device pings the database, and you confirm the on-hand count the computer expects. If the shelf says 12 boxes of Tide and the system claims 15, you hunt for the strays. Most nights, the biggest mystery is whether somebody stashed a 6-pack behind the paper towels. The first oddity landed on September 5th at 2:14 in aisle 23. Small kitchen appliances. The system insisted we owned 47 Hamilton Beach 12-cup coffee makers, model HB450. Kevin and I counted 23 on the shelf. Missing units mean a manual recount and a trip to the back stock cages. Kevin went searching while I scanned other SKUs. 10 minutes later, he radioed me, sounding hesitant. "Blair, I found the coffee makers, but you need to see this." He led me to the old seasonal bay, an unused pocket of the stockroom collecting stray pallets since summer. 24 coffee maker boxes sat there in a perfect cube, dusty as if they'd been abandoned for months. But the freight manifest showed the HB450 shipment delivered only 3 days earlier. Stranger still, these boxes were labeled HB451. Same brand graphics, same barcode location, but the model number was off by 1 digit. We slit 2 cartons. Inside, the brewer looked almost identical, yet subtly different. White housing instead of black, a mechanical dial in place of the digital clock, a stainless carafe rather than glass. Maria met us on the floor. She'd never seen an HB451 in 8 years of night management. Our vendor portal listed no such model. Hamilton Beach's catalog skipped from HB450 to HB452. A thermal carafe unit released the previous year. She logged them as vendor error, returned to supplier, and moved the stack to damages. 3 nights later, 8th September, the pattern repeated in aisle 31 with vacuum cleaners. The database expected 15 Bissell BV200s. The shelf held 8. We discovered 7 dusty cartons in seasonal storage, labeled BV201. Again, a non-existent model. The BV201 manual inside the box claimed 20% stronger suction and a HEPA filter the BV200 lacked. By the second week, the phenomenon accelerated. Hand mixers, air fryers, cordless drills, even men's denim. Every few hours, we'd chase a discrepancy, locate the missing merchandise in that same forgotten bay, and find a model number incremented by 1 and a feature list incremented by several. The pattern felt deliberate, almost mathematical. Kevin began a spreadsheet chronicling each anomaly. Date, time, expected SKU, phantom SKU, features. On 12th September, We logged item 23, a black plus Decker Jigsaw J, D700 replaced by JD701 boasting a brushless motor. The sheer design investment implied these variants weren't simple misprints. Maria, pragmatic to the bone, called the district manager, Robert Chen. He arrived on the 14th of September to observe an entire shift. Robert shadowed us through the dairy cooler's stinging air and the electronics section's silent TVs. At 1:37 a.m., our scanners flagged a shortfall of Samsung 32-inch TVs, model UN32J4000. We physically counted 7. The system demanded 12. Robert followed us to seasonal storage. 5 flat screens rested on a pallet, cartons pristine but dusty. Their stickers read UN32J4001. Robert sliced one open. The set featured built-in Wi-Fi and a smart TV interface absent from the baseline model. "I supervised that product launch," he muttered. J4000 was supposed to be the entry model. J4001 didn't clear manufacturing. He boxed the TV and said nothing more until sunrise. The next afternoon, Robert convened a meeting in the manager's office. Maria, Kevin, me, and 2 auditors from corporate loss prevention. They grilled us about receiving procedure, camera coverage, even our personal finances in case we were fencing counterfeit stock. No explanation fit. The trucks were sealed, cameras showed no tampering, and counterfeiters don't invent better features that slash their profit margin. Corporate launched an audit on 18 September. Technicians imaged every POS terminal and handheld scanner, looking for malware that could rewrite UPC data. They found nothing. They installed sealed GoPro rigs in seasonal storage. Motion-activated lights would make clandestine drops obvious. HR drug-tested the entire crew, clean, yet the items kept appearing. On the 20th of September, Kevin and I enlisted a neutral witness. Lisa Martinez from the pharmacy section joined us for a spot check in appliances. The system claimed 12 Oster 4-slice toasters model TS-350 in stock. The shelf had 6. The back bay held 6 dusty boxes labeled TS-351. Lisa, skeptical at first, opened a box and whistled. The TS-351 sported an LCD browning gauge and a crumb tray you could empty without lifting the toaster. That convinced Lisa, but electronics kept vanishing from our cameras. The GoPros recorded nothing between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. The hour's anomalies surfaced, except the occasional dust mote drifting through LED glare. Audit concluded the merchandise materialized without human vectors, a line that made Robert clench his jaw. Searching for context, I combed city archives. Before Megamart broke ground in 2006, the parcel housed innovative consumer products, an R&D complex specializing in prototype household tech. An electrical fire in October 2003 gutted their warehouse, destroying thousands of pre-release models. Insurance filings listed experimental small appliances, power tools, and entertainment gear, many with model numbers eerily close to those now haunting our inventory. One newspaper clipping featured CEO Victor Latham lamenting, "Years of innovation gone overnight. The market will never see what we built." Latham died 3 months later in what the article called an undisclosed accident. Armed with this, I confronted Robert on the 22nd of September. He listened, hands steepled, then asked, "You think prototypes lost in that fire are pushing themselves into our supply chain from beyond the grave?" I shrugged. I had no better story. Robert staged a controlled delivery on 24 September. He arrived before sundown, broke warehouse CLA himself, verified every carton's UPC. Nothing resembled a phantom product. He even signed a sworn statement. At 3:12, our scanners flagged a deficit of rigid cordless drill kits, model R8701. 4 missing. Seasonal storage revealed 4 dusty boxes, model R8702. Robert turned paler than the overhead LEDs. The district office's final directive on 28 September was bureaucratic. Quarantine all unverified SKUs, remove them from financial books as non-inventoried assets, and continue operations. In plain language, store the ghosts and shut up. Kevin and I couldn't leave it alone. On our breaks, we opened boxes, cataloged specs, ran informal tests. Every phantom performed better than its legitimate cousin. Higher wattage, lower noise, smarter interfaces. They felt like polished products from a timeline where R&D never burned. I started dreaming of a stainless coffee maker with a mechanical dial ticking like a stopwatch, filling the store with rich aroma. I'd wake before my alarm, heart pounding, taste of perfect brew on my tongue. On 2 October, I broke protocol. I bought a Phantom, an HB451 coffee maker, bartering $20 cash with Kevin after Maria clocked out. I snuck it to my apartment, half expecting it to vanish by morning. It didn't. The next night shift, however, the HB451s were gone from quarantine. Inventory showed 0. The shelf displayed standard HB450s again. Surveillance footage revealed nothing. The night after that, my coffee maker disappeared from my kitchen counter. In its place stood an HB450, factory new, drip tray spotless. I searched every cupboard, every trash bag. No HB451. Only my phone's gallery retained proof. A single photo I'd snapped of the analog timer. By dawn, even that image had corrupted into digital static. I haven't told corporate about the swap. The yet item never existed in their system. But each morning, the 451 leaves an afterimage in my nose. The bold scent of coffee brewed at exactly the right temperature. A perfection the 450 can't achieve. Kevin reports similar experiences. He took home a BV201 filter canister. Next day, it was a BV200. Lisa swears her UN32J 4001 smart TV devolved overnight, losing its Wi-Fi menu. It seems the sanctioned universe corrects these anomalies once they cross the sliding doors. Maria, ever practical, has fenced off seasonal storage with yellow caution tape. Hazardous inventory. Do not enter without management. Yet the tape droops every few days, its adhesive failing in the cold breeze no one feels. Behind it, boxes rearrange themselves into neat rows by product type, as though awaiting a grand reveal. Robert's latest memo directs us to log phantom counts weekly for insurance reconciliation. He never explains what insurer covers spectral assets. Sometimes, about 4 a.m., when fluorescent buzz lulls the store into static hush, I imagine unseen engineers roaming the aisles, specters of ICP's development team, still refining prototypes, still chasing a launch that history denied them. They deposit perfected goods, hoping some night crew clerk will notice excellence and shepherd it to daylight shelves. When we quarantine their work, maybe they retrieve it, disappointed, and try again with something subtler. I no longer fear the anomalies. If anything, I respect their craft. Companies chase incremental improvements. These phantoms deliver leaps. A toaster that gauges browning by moisture sensors. A drill whose battery lasts twice as long. A coffee maker that remembers the ratio you like. They arrive dusty, smelling faintly of smoke, as though pulled from a warehouse fire moments before final destruction. A week ago, I found an envelope taped inside my locker, unmarked, containing a single Polaroid. It shows a sleek Megamart sales floor gleaming under softer lights, every end cap displaying the phantom models. Customers smile, test devices, fill carts. The timestamp reads November 14th, 2003, 2:11 a.m., the night before ICP's fire. The back of the photo bears one handwritten line. Products belong with people. I keep the Polaroid tucked behind my ID badge. Maybe someday the world will catch up to whatever pipeline bridges 2003 and now, and those products will belong again. Until then, Kevin scans, I count, Maria files, and seasonal storage breathes like a hidden lung, exhaling invention that can't bear to die. If you ever shop Megamart at dawn and spot a box that looks a shade too old, model number off by 1, consider taking it home. But don't be surprised if it changes into the ordinary overnight. Perfection isn't ready for daylight yet. It's waiting in the dark, with the night crew and with me. Blair, the inventory clerk who now believes that lost ideas never really leave the shelves. Let's move to our 7th story. My name is Kevin Hollis, the lone night shift technician at Parkside Print and Copy, a 24-hour shop wedged between the campus bar scene and the downtown bail bond offices. Most customers are frantic students racing deadlines, lawyers chasing filings, or bleary entrepreneurs tweaking business cards at 2 a.m. My shift, 10 a.m. p.m. to 6 a.m., used to be quiet enough for podcasts and Sudoku. Then the flyers started. The first appeared on the 3rd of April at 12:42 a.m. I was calibrating the big Xerox Versant 3100 when the smaller networked HP printer 04, never busy at that hour, spooled a job without a ticket in the queue. 7 crisp sheets slid into the catch tray. Each page showed the same black and white missing person flyer. Grainy head and shoulders photo of a teenage girl. Name Emily Rose Townsend. Last seen 17th June 1994. Contact number with a defunct 555 exchange. A faded county sheriff badge watermarked the bottom corner. Rogue print jobs happen. Drivers miss route, clients hit the wrong store ID. I logged the waste under network error, shredded the flyers, and reset the spooler. 33 minutes later, the HP word again. Same flyer, 7 more copies. The job ticket field, which should list the originating workstation's IP, was blank. At 2:15 a.m., I phoned Mike, our on-call IT contractor. He remoted in, killed every queue, and purged the cache. 5 minutes after he disconnected, printer 04 warmed up a 3rd time. I stood over it, watching each sheet emerge. No job visible on the server, no workstation lit, just that quiet, rhythmic thunk. 7 copies. Perfect registration. I kept one for evidence, slid the rest through the shredder again, and unplugged printer 04 for the night. Next evening, 4th April, I arrived to find the HP powered off. But 84 identical flyers lay neatly stacked on its output tray, time-stamped throughout the previous day when the morning staff had been working. They assumed I'd queued them from an outside order. I confirmed no cash register entries, no customer flash drive files, no email attachments. The machine had been offline, yet it printed. I dug into local archives. Emily Townsend vanished after a Friday night football game in '94. Case went cold in '97. Her parents distributed thousands of flyers that summer, most printed at, yes, Parkside Print and Copy. Same address, different owners back then. Old newspaper photos show volunteers collating stacks beside a hulking HP LaserJet, predecessor to the unit now haunting my shift. On the 8th of April, at exactly 3:03 a.m., the flyers changed. Same header, missing, but a new photo. Bearded man, mid-30s, named Jacob Allen Pruitt, disappeared 12 August 1998. Same obsolete phone number. 7 copies, no ticket. I kept them. From that night forward, printer 04 produced a new flyer every 3rd shift, always at 3:03 a.m., always 7 copies. Always unsolved disappearances from the mid-90s to early 2000s. Victims whose original notice, I verified through microfilm, had been printed in our shop. The database on our POS still contained those primitive Quark Express files, archived on zip disks shoved in a back closet. I tried experiments. Unplugging the data cable only made the HP cache the prints until reconnection. Swapping the network card forced a 24-hour lull. After that, the flyers resumed. When I physically removed the toner cartridge, the machine cycled blank pages, 7 sheets every time, as though imprinting images I couldn't see. Management told me to stop wasting supplies. I countered with logs, timestamps, security footage. Camera shows me across the room counting envelopes while the printer spits copies, its control panel dark, no job ID blinking. They suggested a publicity stunt. True crime TikTok eats this stuff up. I refused. Exploiting parents' grief felt vile. On 15th April, I stayed near the HP as 303 approached. The shop hummed with fluorescent buzz. At 3:02:58, the printer's fan spun up. Display remained blank, yet internal LEDs glowed a dull amber. Paper feed engaged. 7 sheets slid out one by one. This time the flyer showed 2 faces side by side. Emily Townsend and Jacob Pruitt. Bold caption, "Still missing." Underneath, a line I'd never seen in archive designs. "If you saw them, say something now." The phone behind the counter rang. Old landline we keep as cellular backup. "No caller ID." I answered. Silence, punctuated by faint background clatter like plastic hitting plastic, reminiscent of collated paper tapping a desk. Then a whisper. "Copy. Again." Click. I traced the call. Telecom logs listed the shop's own number as origin. On the 18th of April, I dug into county deeds. Our shop's lot once housed Graham and Sons Funeral Printing, established 1946. Flood damaged 1983, rebuilt as Parkside Print in 92. Local legend says Graham's basement press ran non-stop during a 1970 influenza spike, churning funeral cards while the owner died at his typesetter. That night, 3:03 a.m., produced flyers for 7 different missing persons. 1 per sheet instead of duplicates, each case originally printed here. I felt watched, though the storefront was empty. The ceiling vent whispered like someone riffling paper. I decided to answer the flyer's plea. Using the listed defunct 555 number as seed, I cross-referenced phone book microfiches at the public library, mapped last-seen locations, overlaid them on a city GIS parcel map. Shock. Every disappearance occurred within a 2-mile radius. Centroid, the abandoned rail depot east of campus. Condemned, fenced, forgotten. Morning of 22nd April. After shift, I drove there. Sunlight speared through rusted roof panels. In the central office, I found a corkboard, sagging but intact. Yellowed corners of removed papers clung to pins, standard letter-size rectangles, 7 across, 3 down. Floor litter held scraps of long-faded copier stock. I recognized the watermark pattern. Parkside used in the 90s. Something else lay beneath a collapsed file cabinet. A banker's box labeled Unclaimed Print Jobs, 1994 to 2002. Inside, hundreds of pristine flyers, each bundled in 7s with rubber bands, names matching the printer's recent nocturnal output. Jobs paid in cash, pickup slips unsigned. I photographed everything and turned it over to Detective Hall at Missing Persons. He listened, skeptical, until I produced the fresh flyers still smelling of toner. Forensics dated the paper as modern stock, impossible for cases decades old. Hall sealed Printer 04 as potential evidence. The HP hasn't printed since police hauled it away. But at 3:03 a.m., the Xerox now wakes itself, warms fusers, and flashes a supply low warning even when full. No pages yet, maybe because it's waiting for someone to load the correct template, or maybe because its predecessor left unfinished business. Detective Hall called last week. Cadaver dogs hid on soil behind the rail depot. Excavation begins Monday. Families have been notified. The department asked me to alert them if any new flyers appear. I still work nights. At 2:55 a.m., I mute my podcasts, listen to the store's breathing, the settle of joists, the tick of the exit sign ballast. And I wonder whose face the machines will beg us to remember next, and whether, this time, we'll listen before the ink dries. Let's move to our 8th story. My name is Lisa Karim, and for the past 5 years, I've worked the overnight shift at Northview Animal Emergency, a 24-hour veterinary clinic on the edge of Columbus. My badge says, Licensed Veterinary Technician. But any night shift tech will tell you the job description also includes janitor, grief counselor, and short-order cook for panicked owners who haven't eaten since their dog started seizing. The clinic sits in a converted bank. Lobby turned waiting room. Teller counters walled into exam bays, vault repurposed as the pharmacy. Fluorescent tubes hum overhead, and at 3 in the morning, the only light on the strip mall comes from our sign. Blue paw print flickering like a bad neon beer logo. The oddity began on the 2nd of March, a Wednesday, though I didn't recognize the pattern until later. At 3:33 a.m., a time I remember because I had just entered vitals for a hit-by-car Labrador, the building shuddered as if someone slammed the back door. All 6 hospitalized patients woke simultaneously. Monty, a 12-year-old golden retriever with hemangiosarcoma, jerked upright, IV lines taut. Patches the calico hissed and flattened against her oxygen cage. Even the sedated iguana recovering from tail amputation thrashed under his warming pad. Heart rate monitors spiked, alarms chirped, and for 10 chaotic minutes, I raced room to room silencing equipment. Nothing on the exterior cameras showed movement. I blamed a pressure change from the HVAC cycling. 2 nights later, again at precisely 3:33, I felt the same subaudible boom reverberate through the floor. Every boarding kennel erupted, dogs barking, cats yowling, one ferret on fluid therapy chattering his teeth so hard the e-collar rattled. I checked the weather radar. Clear. I texted our facilities manager, Owen, asking if the strip mall roof work scheduled for next week had started early. He replied with a thumbs-down emoji at 3:40 and wrote, "Roofers don't work nights, Lisa. Go to bed." I wished I could. On Sunday, 6th March, we were near capacity. 15 inpatients, plus 6 critical ER cases. Dr. Selkirk, the only overnight veterinarian, ordered blood gases while I placed central lines. At 3:33, the power flickered but held, and every animal looked toward the east wall, the side that used to be the bank's drive-through. Not random, startled glances. Each head pivoted in unison, eyes tracking something invisible moving past the glass block windows. The monitors blipped higher again. Sinus tachycardia across species, as though a starter pistol had fired only they could hear. When the moment passed, Monty collapsed, breathing ragged. We lost him 20 minutes later despite vasopressors and chest compressions. Owners arrived sobbing at 5 a.m. I lied that his decline had been gradual. Telling them their beloved dog panicked at an invisible cue moments before death felt cruel and clinically useless. Monday was my scheduled off day, but I spent it pulling old incident reports. Northview's software keeps every patient log since opening in 2014. I searched keywords. After-hours agitation, unexplained noise, 0333, and found 32 entries. Each described simultaneous patient distress between 3:30 and 3:35, clusters occurring every March for the past 7 years. Most notes attributed it to electrical surge, trash pickup, or simply left blank. No follow-ups, no preventive actions. That evening, I arrived early and cornered Owen as he replaced an outlet in surgery. "Does the clinic draw extra power at night in March?" He laughed. "Grid load is lower overnight, not higher." "What about generators testing? HVAC cycling?" "Monthly generator test is noon on the 1st. HVAC logs don't show spikes." He stopped, screwdriver clenched. "Why?" I told him the animals' synchronized freakouts. Owen, a pragmatist whose hobbies include ham radio contests and rebuilding carburetors, surprised me by nodding slowly. "I used to manage a PetSmart. Their adoption cats would howl around 3:30 in early spring. Staff joked about ghosts. We blamed delivery trucks." "Delivery trucks don't glide soundlessly past sealed oxygen cages." "That Wednesday, 9th March, I prepared. Before shift, I bought a dozen digital thermometers, the cheap kind with 10-second readouts. At 3 a.m., I taped one to every room's tile floor, bulbs flush against grout. I also placed a seismograph app on my phone, calibrated to register vibrations above 0.5 millimeters per second. At 3:33, the clinic chilled. Thermostat still reading 74 degrees Fahrenheit, yet a cold front seemed to ripple through the halls. All thermometers dropped from 73 degrees Fahrenheit to 68 degrees Fahrenheit within 30 seconds. The seismograph spiked, then flatlined. Animals reacted worse than ever. A post-operative mastiff dislodged her chest tube thrashing. Arterial blood painted the kennel door. While Dr. Selkirk scrubbed in for an emergency thoracotomy, I hustled to stabilize the airway and replace suction canisters. Amid the chaos, a visiting fourth-year vet student, Jana, shouted that the iguana's heart monitor had stopped. Reptiles are hardy post-op, but his trace was a flat line. After 15 minutes of ineffective CPR, we pronounced him. Cause: unexplained sudden cardiac arrest. Later, mopping diluted iodine from my shoes, I caught Jana staring at the east wall. "Did you see something?" I asked. "I thought I heard children laughing," she whispered. "Must have been the oxygen concentrator." We have no pediatric cases, of course, and the concentrator wheezes like a jet engine, not a laugh. On 11th March, Dr. Conway, medical director, reviewed security footage after our shift summary mentioned possible structural vibration. Cameras showed nothing unusual except a faint distortion at 3:33, frames bending as if heat shimmer past. Conway dismissed it as compression artifact and banned any further discussion that might unsettle clients. He instructed us to log patient disturbances under environmental stressor unknown. I decided if administration wouldn't investigate, I would. The old bank's blueprint stores in a binder under reception. Studying it after hours, I noticed an unlabeled void behind the east wall, 4 feet wide, running the length of the building between the exam rooms and the strip mall's shared masonry. According to county permits, it served as a ventilation plenum for the drive-through teller area, sealed when the bank closed. Access point: a narrow utility hatch behind the kennel washer, screwed shut and painted over. Sunday, 13th March, I brought my cordless driver. At 1 a.m., Kevin, night kennel attendant and part-time EMT, helped me move racks of detergent. Removing the hatch released stale air tinged with mildew and antiseptic, like forgotten hospital corridors. We aimed flashlights into the crawlspace. Metal conduit snaked along cinder block. Dust carpeted the concrete. and scattered across the corridor lay dozens of plastic ID tags, the kind we snap onto pet carriers, each stamped with a date and patient name. All dates fell between the 12th and 18th of March. Different years, always this same week. Many tags bore red stickers indicating DNR, or guarded prognosis. Some names I recognized. Monty, the golden we lost. Hamlet, a Persian euthanized last year. Daisy, a terrier that coded in recovery 2 years back. Kevin knelt, paled. These should be in medical waste. Farther in, we found thermistors wired to a metal box the size of a lunch cooler. No manufacturer label, only rotary dials set to 333 and a dead 9-volt battery. I felt a low hum through the box's casing, though it wasn't connected to power. My phone's seismograph app went wild, vibrations spiking though I sensed none underfoot. I unscrewed the lid. Inside, a loop of coiled copper around a quartz crystal pulsed with faint blue light. No circuit board, just impossible geometry. Kevin cursed and backed away. The glow intensified, and from the kennel area came a collective whine of animals rousing. We resealed the box, stuffed it into a biohazard bag, and carried it to the incinerator chute used for pharmaceutical waste. At exactly 3:33, as we stood over the chute hatch, the bag jerked in my hands, like something inside convulsed. I dropped it, and we slammed the lever. Flames roared, a safety system ensuring 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit combustion. Yet a cold gust swept the hallway, extinguishing overhead fluorescent bulbs in a wave heading back toward the treatment floor. The building plunged into darkness, animals screaming. Emergency lights kicked on 30 seconds later. Printer paper fluttered across reception, though no doors were open. In the ward, cages hung ajar even where latches require thumbs. Patients cowered at the rear of kennels, eyes dilated, but vitals steady. No code blues, thank God. Only the corpse freezer alarm chirped, temperature rising. Inside, the iguana's body bag lay split, zipper teeth sheared. The carcass was gone. Dr. Conway arrived at 5:20 after we paged him about facility power anomalies. He dismissed the incinerator story, nothing unusual in its ashpan, and lectured on professional boundaries. We received incident write-ups for unauthorized access and destruction of unknown property. That night, I wasn't scheduled, but drove by on my dinner break from a day clinic locum shift. From the street, I saw animals pressed to the glass of every window. Cats, dogs, a rescued owl, all staring eastward. My phone clock read 3:32. I pulled into the lot, engine idling. At 3:33, all heads pivoted toward me, unblinking, as if the windows became two-way mirrors. The blue paw print sign flickered off. Clinic plunged into silhouette. Then, shapeless but denser than darkness, something slid between me and the building. My headlights refracted like through water. The shape moved east beyond the strip mall canopy and vanished. The paw sign relit. In the morning, Kevin texted a photo. The iguana had reappeared in surgery, perched on the autoclave, eyes open though tissues mummified. Around its neck hung an ID tag reading, "New patient, March 14th, 2022. Status, observe." No one admitted it to the computer. 2 days later, Conway transferred me to day shift, pending fit-for-duty evaluation. Kevin quit outright. Jana returned to campus, leaving a note that said only, "The vault is not empty." I drive past Northview some nights, and at 3:33, the paw sign always flickers, as if something inside still calibrates itself to that perfect sliver of early morning time. I haven't reported any of this to the State Veterinary Board. Licensing bodies don't like supernatural anecdotes. Instead, I've mailed copies of the flyers, Yes, flyers, from the print shop downtown that suddenly began appearing in our clinic lobby after hours. Silhouettes of cats and dogs, captioned, "If you saw them, say something now." The listed number rings once, then plays overlapping barks, meows, and what might be a child laughing. I still keep one thermistor in my purse. Every night at 3:33, wherever I am, it drops 5 degrees and then warms back to normal. When that happens, I whisper the names on those ID tags, hoping acknowledgement is enough. Because I'm haunted less by the thing in the crawl space than by the realization that, despite years of dedication, every creature under my care sensed a presence I refused to see, until it stepped out of the walls and asked, in its own seismic language, to be witnessed. Let's move to our 9th story. My name is Chris, and for 3 years, I worked the night audit shift at the Riverside Motel, a 2-story budget property off Interstate 84, where truckers, traveling sales reps, and weary motorists paid cash for a clean bed and a hot shower. Night audit ran 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., and the job covered everything from late check-ins to balancing the day's receipts. While being the only employee awake in a building with 43 rooms and whatever memories they held, the Riverside opened in 1987, back when the bypass promised endless traffic, and the surrounding strip still boasted 3 gas stations and a family diner. By the time I started in 2019, it survived on low rates and location. Most nights, I saw 6 or 7 guests at most. Regulars like Eddie the lumber driver, the occasional company traveler, and people whose cars, or lives, had broken down one exit back. The audit work itself is monotonous but fussy. Reconcile credit card batches, post room and tax, print reports, roll the property management system to the next business day. I could do it half asleep, and often did, until room 237 made sure I stayed wide awake. The PMS listed 237 as OUS maintenance since June 2018. A bold red DNR meant do not rent. Manager override required to touch the status. My day shift boss, Janet, told me the AC unit had failed and corporate wouldn't pony up the repair funds. When I volunteered my HVAC skills, she said the door was sealed and staff weren't to enter. End of discussion. But guests kept asking for it. 15 March 2019, 12:30 a.m. A middle-aged man in a rumpled suit sets a scuffed briefcase on the counter and says he has a reservation for room 237. System shows nothing. I explain the room is offline and offer 235 or 239. He frowns. I always stay in 237, 15 years running. Search history. No record of his name, David Morrison, ever staying with us. He sighs, picks up the briefcase, tells me, "Let them in 237 know David said hello," and walks into the parking lot. No car starts, no footsteps on gravel. He's just gone. 8 April, 1:10 a.m. A woman with a floral suitcase asks for 237. My sister books it for me every spring. I gesture to the dark row of second-floor rooms, explain the outage. She points, but the light's on. Sure enough, a warm yellow glow silhouettes the curtains of 237, a room that's been without power for a year. I grab the master key, climb the metal stairs, and find the deadbolt thrown from inside. Knock, jiggle, solid. When I return, the lobby's empty, and the suitcase woman has vanished. By July, the requests come weekly, then every other night. Different names, same insistence. A salesman swears he booked 237 through a website I've never heard of. A honeymoon couple claims memories there, though our ledger shows no weddings in a decade. An elderly vet says his late wife adored the view of a courtyard that was paved over in '95. I start a spiral notebook Date, name, their story. After 2 months, I have 37 entries and escalating curiosity. 17th August, Saturday night, few check-ins, relief manager on duty day shift only. I decide to see the forbidden room. At 2 a.m., I pocket the master, grab a flashlight, and head upstairs. Door looks normal. Beige paint, brass numbers. I knock. Silence. Key slides in. Bolt clicks back easily this time. Inside, the room is pristine and occupied. Bed made tight, bedside lamp glowing, HVAC purring at 72 degrees Fahrenheit. In the closet hang neatly pressed clothes. A man's dress shirt, a woman's cardigan, a little boy's windbreaker with Tommy sewn inside. I touch the shirt. Fabric feels real. But when I lift it from the hanger, it evaporates like cigarette smoke. On the desk sits a leather guest book. Entries span 2005 to last week, signatures matching my notebook of would-be guests. Wonderful stay, just like always. Thanks for keeping our room ready. Ink looks aged appropriately. Paper edges curl. Yet none of these stays exist in the computer. I snap photos of everything. Back at the desk, I review them. Every image shows a dusty, gutted room. Mattress bare, carpet stained, lamp unplugged, no clothes, no guest book. I double-check the timestamps. They're right. Reality seems to fork in my camera roll. I call the 24-hour corporate maintenance hotline. The tech promises escalation. 2 days later, Janet hands me a written directive. Staff are not to enter 237. Issue considered closed. The brass numbers are removed from the door that afternoon. September's shifts bring a twist. People now approach the desk not to check in, but to check out of 237, laying a vintage room key, brass fob stamped 237, on the counter. It's our pre-2008 style, phased out when we went electronic. System still shows the room O's. I lock the key in my drawer. It disappears, only to be returned by another departing guest nights later. Wear patterns identical, but never worsening. My breaking point arrives October 3rd, 3:17 a.m. Printer spits an arrival slip, auto-generated PMS form, for guest David Morrison, room 237, folio prepaid cash. The PMS won't even allow 237 to populate, yet the slip sits warm on the tray. I walk to the doorless room. A faint TV glow strobes behind the curtains. In the lot below, I see Morrison's silhouette waving up at the balcony before fading from the sodium light like dust in wind. Promotion to assistant manager in November moves me to days. My replacement, Ashley, lasts 3 weeks. She reports hearing late-night voices in 237 and seeing shadowed figures moving behind curtain glass. Janet answers by painting over the doorframe entirely. No knob, no hinges, just continuous siding. A month ago, I drove past on my way home from a wedding. Midnight drizzle, vacancy sign glowing. I parked under a dead lamppost and looked up. The featureless wall where 237's door once existed shimmered with a soft interior, light, as though the wall itself had thinned. In that glow stood silhouettes. A man holding a briefcase, a woman clutching a floral bag, a child in a windbreaker. They turned as one, as if they sensed an old clerk watching from the dark. I don't understand what 237 is. Maybe a fold in time where habitual travelers play out eternal layovers. Maybe the riverside, neglected yet familiar, became an anchor for their yearning. Hotels are liminal by design, easy to check into, easier to forget. Perhaps some guests refuse to forget, and so the room remembers them instead. If you ever stop at the riverside after midnight and the desk clerk can't find your reservation, don't insist on a room that isn't there. Accept whatever key you're handed, sleep, and move on with the morning traffic. Because some checkouts never process, some folios never close, and some rooms audit themselves. Night after endless night. Let's move to our 10th story. I'm Dave Kelleher, employee I-4207 on the night crew at Silverline Fulfillment Center in Bloomington, Illinois. We're a 480,000 square foot warehouse sandwiched between cornfields and a pair of data centers. The kind of place you never notice from the interstate unless you try to count the identical gray rectangles dotting the horizon. My title is Senior Forklift Operator. But that mostly means I've survived 5 holiday seasons without racking a pallet into a sprinkler line. My shift runs 6 p.m. to 4 a.m., Sunday through Wednesday. After 4 years, the drone of conveyor motors is white noise, and I can thread a Crown Reach truck down any aisle blindfolded. Or I could, until the loads started showing up on Dock 14. Dock 14 sits at the far east wall near the dumpster compactors, a spot nobody likes because the floor slopes just enough to make pallets creep if you don't chock them. Manifested trailers back in on a 20-minute cadence. Scan, seal, break, lock, unload, scan cartons, stage by zone. Every inbound carton carries a 4-digit vendor code followed by the SKU and a 6-digit Julian date. When something doesn't match the EDI manifest, the zebra scanner honks and you set the box aside for problem solving. Easy, except the boxes on Dock 14 never honked. The first appeared 11th May at 23:47. I remember the time stamp because I had paused to refill my water bottle and saw the trailer indicator flip from awaiting to in progress, though no driver had checked in. Regulations require a live driver until a yard dog drops the trailer. Yet the yard tracker showed nothing incoming. When I walked over, a 53-footer was already pressed against the dock, engine silent, ICC bumper still warm like it had been running moments earlier. The seal number, a 188732, wasn't on any paperwork. Company policy says you log an orphan trailer as Phantom and wait for the inbound coordinator. But the bay door sensor registered an open load, and the conveyor idle counter was ticking. Somebody upstairs thought I was slacking. So I broke the seal, swung the doors, and found 56 double-walled cartons, all identical. Unbranded craft, green stenciled code PDX9211, and a bright red dry ink stamp that read, Receive May 12th, 2025. Tomorrow's date. No barcodes, no SKU labels, nothing for the zebra to read. Still, when I aimed the laser, the scanner beeped happy and displayed a Phantom SKU I'd never seen. 000-000-0000 with a quantity of 1. The WMS auto-routed it to Zone 44, seasonal decor, then cleared the exception queue. That cannot happen. The system rejects unlabeled product by design. I should have flagged the entire load, but screens don't lie. And Lawson, the night supervisor, is the kind who prints policy excerpts if you improvise. I unloaded the cartons, staged them, and moved on. At 2:10, Chris from replenishment radioed swearing the cartons weren't in Zone 44. We searched for an hour. No trace. Inventory reported the SKUs as in stock, with perfect bin locations that didn't exist on any map. Lawson chalked it up to a database sync glitch and told us to drop it. 2 nights later, I watched Dock 14 like a hawk, 2341, same deal. Trailer appears in the slot with no gate log, seal beginning with A1, 30 more unlabeled cartons stamped Receive 051525. And again, tomorrow's date. This time I popped a box open. Inside was no merchandise, just a banker's box of personal effects. Polaroid photos, baby shoes, utility bills, an inhaler. At the bottom lay a Department of Motor Vehicles ID for a woman named Eleanor Watkins. Birth year 1984, address 2 towns over. Expiration date, May 15th, 2025, tomorrow. I resealed the carton with filament tape and scanned it. Zebra chirped good, WMS swallowed it, and the pallet vanished from inventory by shift end. I took the ID home, planning to return it if it was stolen, and Googled Eleanor. The first hit was a GoFundMe titled, "Help Eleanor Fight Stage 4. Active but dormant since March." I convinced myself some third-party salvage vendor was offloading self-storage defaults through us. Ugly, but not illegal. On the 18th of May, a third trailer showed. I rolled a GoPro on my hard hat to capture proof. Footage shows me at 23:39 walking the yellow line beside 14-dock door closed, empty bay. I leaned to scan a pallet tag on 13, turned back, and the trailer is there. Engine off, reverse lights still glowing. Playback reveals one dropped frame between the 2 states. Less than 1/10 second. Audio registers a single pop like static discharge. That's all. These cartons bore Receive 05-19-25. Inside, framed diplomas, a Purple Heart, 3 kids' report cards, a folded flag, and a letter from Veterans Affairs addressed to Harold Conklin, dated May 19th of this year, again the following day. I photographed the letter's header. The file corrupted itself, graying out the words after capture. By now, sleep came hard. I'd wake at noon to find household items outside my apartment door. A pair of toddler overalls, a 1997 tax return, somebody's wedding RSVP. Each bore a sticky note stamped "sorted." I dumped them in a Rubbermaid tub and quit reading. Corporate loss prevention arrived 26th May. 2 men, identical haircuts, each carrying a Pelican case and no surnames on their badges, just asset control. We cued surveillance, but every relevant clip froze in those same micro-missing frames. The agents interviewed me under the mezzanine mezz. What names were on the boxes? Did I remove any items? Did I tell anyone else? Their last question, "Have you checked tomorrow's obituary list?" was delivered in a tone that suggested they already had. I had not, so I did after they left. Local news listed 3 death notices for May 27th. Eleanor Watkins, 41, Harold Conklin, 67, and a 6-year-old boy named Thomas Kelleher, my nephew in Peoria, victim of a late-night car accident. His belongings: toddler overalls with grass stains, missing since my sister's garage sale, the ones stacked outside my door. Grief is personal, but shock hollowed me out. I spent the next night walking the PICMOD, refusing to approach Dock 14, ignoring radio pings. At 1:12, the building lights browned for 2 seconds, UPS batteries whining. When power steadied, every fork terminal displayed a new hot message. Urgent inbound. Zone 55. Receive 052825. We don't have a Zone 55. Lawson herded us front of house. In the staging core sat 8 pallets shrink-wrapped in translucent white, each tagged with my employee number. He pried the wrap. Inside were plastic totes bearing my handwriting, college notebooks, ticket stubs, the quartz wristwatch my father gave me when I graduated trade school. On the lid of the top tote, red ink stamped like the others. Receive 05-2025. I lost it, screaming that I hadn't packed these, that someone broke into my apartment. HR drug tested me on the spot, found nothing. Footage showed me earlier that shift loading the totes onto a pallet alone. I have no memory of doing so. I resigned effective immediately, but when I tried to badge out the front gate, security said my credential already read separated with a timestamp of tomorrow morning. Badge photo grayed out, name field blank. At home before dawn, I threw every tote into my trunk and drove 6 counties west, stopping at a quarry I visited as a kid. I rolled the totes into the drink, watched them sink, felt nothing but bone-deep fatigue. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Delivered May 28th, 2025, 4:16 a.m. I hurled the phone after the bins and drove to a motel, sleeping 12 dreamless hours. Next evening, I returned to the quarry for whatever closure water might offer. On the gravel shoulder sat 8 dry totes, wrap intact, labels pristine. Pickup slip tucked under the lid. Thank you for your service, David Kelleher. Account closed. My name, not Dave, not employee code. Full legal with middle initial. The slip carried the Silverline logo. Printed tomorrow's date. I haven't been back to the fulfillment center. After HR processed my exit, dated May 28th, 2025, though I quit the night before, the company courier left a final envelope at my door. Inside, a severance check for exactly the amount my parents' life insurance policies paid for their funeral costs 20 years earlier, and a single line typed beneath, balance zeroed. The totes occupy my rented storage unit now. I've tried burning one. The melted plastic reformed overnight, contents unharmed. I mailed another to a cousin in Oregon. Tracking shows in transit arrives May 25th, cycling endlessly. The quarry load remains stacked in my living room, labels facing the door like they're queued for departure. Sometimes, near midnight, I hear the familiar double beep of a handheld scanner from the hallway and the hydraulic sigh of a pallet jack, though I live on the 3rd floor with no freight elevator. My mailbox fills with packing slips dated the following day, each showing quantities received. Memories, various, total 1. I don't know who is shipping these lives, or why tomorrow is always the destination. Maybe Silverline struck a logistics deal with whatever ledger balances the living and the soon-to-be-gone, and Dock 14 was the crossover point. Maybe loss prevention agents weren't safeguarding assets, but escorting them to an inventory beyond forklifts and barcodes. I only know the system never loses track. Every item finds its bin, every bin its slot, every slot its timestamp. And if you stand alone on a silent dock after hours, barcode scanner in hand, and a trailer materializes where nothing was a blink before, don't break the seal. Walk away. Let manifest and memory sort themselves. Because once the system decides your cargo, it will package your whole life, label it with tomorrow's date, and move you to a location no map can find. Perfectly scanned, forever accounted for. Let's move to our 11th story. My name is Eddie Salazar, employee number 3096 of Allied Protective Services. And last Thursday was supposed to be my final overnight shift at the Crestwood Galleria, the suburban Illinois mall that opened in 1978 with fountains, brass railings, and the promise of endless shopping Saturdays. By the time I signed the logbook 6 years ago, more storefronts were gated than glowing. Anchor tenants pulled out one by one, the food court ceiling leaked brown rings after every storm, and teenagers treated the cavernous corridors like a zombie apocalypse movie set. In April, county planners approved demolition and a mixed-use redevelopment. Contractors erected chain-link fencing, and my orders changed from discourage loitering to prevent trespass. Security coverage dwindled from 3 guards per night to just me, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., through the last week before the wrecking balls arrived. I always parked by the old Sears Auto Bay because the light pole there still worked, and habit made me tap the hood twice in case raccoons were sheltering under the engine. My final shift fell on 17th July. Temperature 82 degrees Fahrenheit at sundown, cicadas droning. I keyed the employee entrance, disabled the lone alarm zone that still functioned, and walked the concourse with my maglite, even though every overhead fixture remained powered until utilities cut the feed. Empty benches, silent escalators, sun-bleached banners for events long past. Back to school blowout 2015. The hollow echo of my boots never bothered me until I realized I would never walk this route again. I signed the 2205 round in the notebook kept at guest services, now an island of dusty laminate. The previous line was mine from the night before. No one else had touched the pen in 23 hours. I flipped a second pad used when the mall still required 2 guards to initial separate zones. Blank since May. Feeling ceremonial, I wrote, "Final night. All clear, see you on the other side." At 22:17, the fire panel buzzer chirped once. Zone 54, North Wing, sprinkler flow. That wing had been dry piped for 2 years. The heads were physically severed after copper thieves stripped the risers. A software hiccup, I assumed, but protocol demanded inspection. I walked the north corridor past shuttered storefronts. Claire's, Radio Shack, a local vape shop that never paid its December rent. Halfway down, motion lights flicked on. Those were disabled last winter to save power. The bulbs hummed and brightened, revealing something impossible. The facade of a toy store, Riley's Wonderland, complete with primary colored letters and window displays of plush animals. Crestwood had a Riley's in the 80s. It shuttered before I was born. I remembered the logo from archival photos in the memorabilia display near the food court. I approached the gate expecting plywood, but gleaming glass and a fresh chrome roll-up greeted me. Through it, I saw shelves stacked with boxed board games and RC cars still in shrink wrap. Air smelled faintly of bubblegum and pine, the scent machines malls used in the Reagan years. I raised my maglite, and the beam reflected off spotless tile that should have been cracked concrete. The fire panel still showed sprinkler flow, but I heard no water. The silence felt as heavy as humidity before a storm. My radio crackled, channel idle for months. "Security, come in." Male voice, early 30s, upbeat. Nobody else had a handset. Maintenance surrendered theirs when layoffs hit. I pressed transmit. "This is Crestwood 1, identify." Static, then the same voice. "Late night for you, Eddie. Meet us at the food court. We're almost ready." The transmission ended with the click of an analog side button, not the digital chirp of our modern Motorola. I should have called my supervisor, but Anthony would be asleep and would chalk it up to glitching equipment again. I headed toward the food court, passing more storefronts glowing as if the mall's heyday had resurrected under neon. Deb's shops, Babbage's software, Han's shoes. Each looked staffed, hangers straight, registers illuminated. Yet the gate locks remained engaged. The main rotunda opened like a stadium. Where plywood partitions had hid demolished kiosks, an ice cream stand now gleamed, spinning a chrome napkin dispenser under fluorescent bars. Fluorescent bars that were ripped out months ago. In the center, the dormant fountain spewed 3 arcs of water into a turquoise basin, its pump purring. That pump burned out in 2016. I helped maintenance remove it. Tables ringed the pool, every chair occupied. I counted maybe 80 people. Families with pretzel cups, mall walkers in sweatsuits, teenagers dangling shopping bags. The low hum of conversation bounced off skylights that should have been sprayed white to block UV damage. I froze at the balcony rail, unseen. Everyone below appeared period-specific. Hairstyles, clothes with old logos, camcorder cam, Zubaz pants, Foxtrot Records tees. A large banner unfurled from the ceiling, its fresh vinyl reading, Crestwood Grand Opening, July 18, 1978. Tomorrow's date, minus 45 years. A voice beside me. Thought you'd never make it. I spun, a guard in khaki shirt and brown slacks, security patch I'd only seen in decade-old photos, smiled and offered a cardboard drink carrier with 2 orange Julius cups. His nameplate read, M. Alvarez. Allied's records list Alvarez as the first guard Crestwood hired. He died in 1992, aneurysm during shift. I staggered back, words jammed in my throat. Alvarez didn't notice, gazing fondly at the crowd. Management wants one last sweep before doors open. Come on, rookie. He stepped toward the escalator, which gleamed chrome and rubber, not the corroded skeleton of last week. I followed, shoes somehow silent. At the base, a band played soft rock on a portable stage, keytar, tenor sax. Food court vendors bustled. Sparrow pizza steam curled upward. I smelled marinara and yeast, vivid as memories of skipping class senior year. Alvarez gestured to a corridor leading to Sears. Take the anchors, clock back in by 4. Opening ceremony starts at 10 sharp. I obeyed, legs mechanical. Halfway to Sears, I passed a young couple pinning coupons on a bulletin board, discussing whether to buy their child a stuffed koala. Their voices echoed with mild reverb, like tape playback. I realized no one had acknowledged my presence since Alvarez. I lifted my hand to an elderly man. His eyes crossed me, unfocused, then returned to his pretzel. Sears' entrance loomed, bright white letters unyellowed by sun. Inside, escalators operated. Mannequins wore polyester suits. A red, white, and blue bunting banner. Gigantic bicentennial sale continues. That slogan ended in 1978 across most chains. A floor associate folded sweaters near men's sportswear. I approached within 3 feet. She didn't flinch. Her name tag, Emily, happy to help. Lips moved silently, no vocal cords engaged. Close up, I noted faint static around her outline, as if my eyesight pixelated. I waved, her form flickered, then resumed folding. My watch, digital Casio I bought online, displayed 12:00 blinking, battery symbol full, then empty, then full. I pulled the Motorola, screen dead. Panic rose. The mall's cell reception died months ago, but Wi-Fi still existed. Now the phone refused to turn on. Adrenaline cut through dream haze. I backed out of Sears, retracing steps toward the security office. Maybe my CRT camera feeds still showed real corridors. As I reached the Rotunda Bridge, the crowd froze mid-gesture. Fountain water hung in midair like glass. Music halted on a sustained sax note. Alvarez stood center stage holding a microphone connected to nothing. "Attention, shoppers," he said, voice booming through silent air. "Crestwood Galleria thanks you for 45 wonderful years." His eyes locked on me, even though I remained above on the balcony. We couldn't have done it without our dedicated staff. He extended an arm, inviting me down. The crowd turned heads in unison, their eyes hollow as mannequins. Still they held bags, pretzels, cups floating inches above halted trays. I bolted toward the service corridor behind K Jewelers, a route leading to my office and the exit stairwell. Fluorescent tubes here remained, as I remembered. Half dark, buzzing. The acoustics changed, my breathing echoed. At the office door, I keyed the lock. It resisted, then clicked. Inside, monitors glowed black and white. Cameras displayed the mall as it truly should be. Empty halls, dark storefronts, litter tumbling in HVAC drafts. On monitor 3, the food court rotunda lay deserted, fountain dry, tiles cracked. Relief hit until Alvarez stepped into frame, alone, looked up at the camera and mouthed, "Clock in." Motion lights died. My own reflection merged with his on the egg glass. I yanked open the filing cabinet, searching maintenance logs for anything. In the bottom drawer, rested a leather registration book identical to the one in 237 earlier. Embossed Crestwood Security. Inside, signatures and flowing script. Eddie S., July 18th, 2023, last round. Below, blank lines preceded dates progressing year by year, up to July 18th, 1978, looping again, every 12 months reversing. My signature had appeared before I wrote it. Hardware thudded against the office door. Not fists, keys hitting metal. Door handle twisted, though my key still jutted. I shoved a desk under the knob. Overhead lights strobed, printers whined, spewing pages of Crest logos. The radio, thought dead, crackled with overlapping voices chanting, "Grand opening, grand opening." I had to escape. Rear maintenance stairs descended to a loading bay. I barreled down, soles skidding. Each landing's wall bore fresh posters. Join us at Crestwood, July 18. The paint looked tacky wet. Door at base pushed outward to the dumpster alley. Night air hit, cool and real. Chain link fence beyond, my car visible in the lone functioning light. As I crossed asphalt, mall speakers, ones removed years ago, blared a muffled countdown. 5, 4. Lights in every skylight ignited, bathing parking lot in sterile glow. 3. My key fob clicked. Engine started. 2. A second set of automatic doors I'd never seen slid open beside the employee entrance, revealing the bustling interior from moments ago, crowd now rushing toward exits in grainy fast-forward motion. 1. I floored the accelerator. Tires squealed across faded arrows. In the rearview mirror, the mall sat dark again, doors sealed. No crowd, no lights. Only chain link rustling. Police dismissed the trespass report I filed. No signs of forced entry, security tapes showing only me wandering deserted halls. My employer accepted a doctor's note and reassigned me to a medical office complex. Yesterday, demolition began. Local news drone footage shows heavy equipment tearing through the north wing. Yet each night at 22:17, my phone receives a push notification from an app I don't have installed. Crestwood Galleria grand opening ceremony starts in 30 minutes. Staff entrance only. Clock in, Eddie. Tonight is July 18th, the anniversary embedded everywhere. My work badge weighs heavy in my pocket, though it no longer opens any door. If I drive to the rubble site, I know what I'll find. Equipment idle, chain link peeled back, a single corridor intact and glowing under 1978 fluorescence, inviting the last security guard to take one more final round. So if you ever pass an abandoned mall after dark and the inside looks brighter than it should, keep driving. Some openings never end, and some employees are never allowed to clock out. Thanks for walking these graveyard corridors with verified fears. If the lights in your workplace flicker a little after midnight tonight, maybe don't look too closely. You're still on the clock. Stay safe and remember to lock up, if the building lets you.